The morning sun rose gently over Jerusalem, casting golden light upon the domes and towers of Solomon's great city. The temple, his greatest achievement, shimmered in the early glow as birds circled above it. But inside the palace, the once mighty king stirred restlessly in his bed, the weight of age and regret pressing heavily on his soul. Solomon, son of David, was now a man of 70. His beard, once dark and flowing, had turned white. His eyes, once sharp with wisdom and curiosity, had grown tired and hollow. He no longer rose with strength or ambition. His physicians whispered of his failing heart. Servants moved quietly around him, afraid to disturb his silence. But it was not his body that tormented Solomon most. It was his spirit. In his youth, the Lord had given him unmatched wisdom. He wrote Proverbs, judged with perfect fairness, and built the house of the Lord. His fame reached across the known world. Yet in the twilight of his life, he found himself tormented by the choices he had made. His heart had turned after foreign gods. He had built altars to Molech and Ashtoreth, to please the many wives he had taken, wives who did not worship the God of Israel. The Lord had appeared to him twice and warned him. But Solomon's heart had grown proud, and his wisdom became clouded with vanity. On this final day, Solomon felt the weight of these sins more than ever before. He rose with difficulty and leaned on the staff beside his bed. "Bring me Nathan," he said in a voice hoarse with age. Nathan the scribe, a younger man now, came quickly and bowed low. "My lord, your servant is here." Solomon waved his hand. "Sit, Nathan. I do not summon you to flatter me, but to write down my final thoughts." Nathan drew out a scroll and ink. "I have seen riches," Solomon began, "and I have tasted pleasures. I built gardens and palaces. I owned herds beyond number. Yet all of it is vanity. Without the Lord, it is like chasing the wind." He paused, coughing into a cloth. When he drew it away, there was a spot of blood. Nathan looked away, troubled. Solomon's voice grew softer. "I was once close to the Lord. I heard his voice in dreams. But my heart drifted, and now, even in my old age, I feel far from him." The wind stirred the linen curtains of the room, as if the heavens themselves were listening. "I have something to confess," Solomon whispered. "A vision came to me last night, one unlike any I have seen since my youth." The Lord spoke again. Nathan looked up sharply. "What did he say?" Solomon looked toward the east, where the temple stood in the morning light. He said, "Because you have not walked in my ways, the kingdom will be torn from your son, not in your days, but in his. Yet for the sake of David your father, I will leave him one tribe." Nathan's hands trembled. "I have failed," Solomon said. "My wisdom was not enough. My strength faded. And now I must face the end." But even as sorrow filled his heart, a strange peace came over the king. For in that same vision, he had seen something more, a glimpse of the Messiah, who would one day come from his line. A king who would be greater than Solomon. A king of righteousness and eternal peace. Solomon closed his eyes and rested for a moment. The past weighed heavily, but hope flickered like a candle in the dark. And so, the final day of the great king had begun, not with power, but with reflection, sorrow, and the faint beginning of redemption. The courtyards of the palace buzzed with unease. Servants spoke in hushed tones as they moved between marble columns and cedar halls. Though no trumpet had sounded, everyone sensed that something was changing, something final. The king had not emerged for morning prayers. The usual clatter of his counsel's voices was absent from the chambers. Only the whisper of sandals and the soft rustling of robes filled the air. In the royal court, Adoniram, the overseer of labor, met with Benaiah, the commander of the guard. They stood beneath a towering olive tree, its silver-green leaves glinting in the breeze. "How is he?" Benaiah asked quietly. Adoniram shook his head. "He is awake, but he speaks little. They say the king had a vision last night." Benaiah furrowed his brow. "A vision?" "Yes, of the Lord." They both fell silent. The last time Solomon had received a word from the Lord was many years ago, and it had not been a word of peace. As the two men parted, a figure emerged from one of the palace side halls, Rehoboam, the son of Solomon and Naamah the Ammonite. Rehoboam was tall and strong, but his face bore little of his father's serenity. His brow was furrowed, and his eyes darted like a man unsure of his own shadow. He had heard the rumors. That morning, A servant had brought him word. The king had summoned Nathan the scribe. He had spoken of the kingdom, of judgment, and of Rehoboam himself. Rehoboam entered the hall of cedar, his father's throne room, and looked around. The golden lions that lined the steps leading to the ivory throne stared back at him. He walked slowly to the base of the platform and stood in silence. He had grown up in this place. He had watched men come from Sheba, Arabia, and Egypt to lay gifts at his father's feet. But that glory felt far away now. The people had grown restless with Solomon's heavy taxes. The 12 governors struggled to keep peace among the tribes. There was tension in the air, like the moment before a storm breaks. And now, Solomon was dying. Just then, a voice broke the silence behind him. "You come early, my son." Rehoboam turned and bowed low. It was Nathan. "I heard my father spoke of me," Rehoboam said, rising slowly. Nathan studied him. "He did." Rehoboam's hands clenched. "What did he say?" Nathan chose his words carefully. "He said the Lord has shown him what will come after his death, that the kingdom will be divided. 10 tribes will break away. You will rule only one." Rehoboam's eyes widened. "What madness is this?" "It is judgment," Nathan replied, his voice even. "The Lord will not tear it from Solomon's hand, but from yours. For his heart turned from God, and so did yours." Rehoboam stepped back, breathing hard. "I have done nothing yet." "Not yet," Nathan agreed. "But the Lord sees all. You must humble yourself before him." Rehoboam turned and stormed away, fury in his stride. Nathan remained, staring up at the throne Solomon had once ascended with wisdom and favor. Now it sat empty, cold, and silent. The same silence echoed across the palace halls, where no songs were sung, no psalms read, and no laughter rang out. Solomon, once the wisest man on earth, lay in his chamber waiting for the end. But beyond those walls, men whispered, alliances shifted, and power began to unravel. The last day was not only a day of fading breath. It was the day the future began to tremble. The sun was now high in the sky, casting its heat over the rooftops of Jerusalem. Yet inside the cool stone walls of the palace, King Solomon lay covered in blankets, his body growing weaker. His mind drifted between past and present, between glory and shame. By his bedside stood Zadok the priest, the faithful servant of God who had anointed Solomon king all those years ago. Now old himself, Zadok had come at Solomon's request, and with him stood a prophet, Ahijah the Shilonite. He was a quiet man, not often in the courts, but when he spoke, kings trembled. Solomon looked at the two holy men with fading eyes. "I remember the day you poured the oil on my head, Zadok," he whispered. The trumpet blew. The people shouted, "Long live King Solomon." Zadok nodded solemnly. "The Lord chose you, my king." Solomon turned to Ahijah. "And now, he has chosen to tear down what I built." Ahijah bowed his head. "Not all of it, my lord. For the sake of David, the Lord will leave a remnant." Solomon sighed. "A remnant? That is all that remains." Ahijah stepped closer, his voice soft but steady. "There is still time to repent." Solomon looked away, tears in his eyes. "I have offered sacrifices. I have prayed." "No," Ahijah said gently. "You have offered sacrifices on many altars, not just the Lord's." A heavy silence followed. Solomon knew it was true. He had once walked so closely with God. He had written, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom." But in his later years, he had allowed the seduction of power, women, and idols to lead him far from that fear. He had married foreign princesses, hundreds of them, Egyptian, Moabite, Sidonian. For each, he built a shrine, thinking himself generous and tolerant. But tolerance had become compromise, and compromise became rebellion. Solomon gripped his blanket tightly. "What must I do?" Zadok spoke now. "Return your heart fully to the Lord. Destroy the high places. Cast down the idols. Speak a word of repentance to the people. Leave behind a legacy not just of gold and stone, but of truth." But Solomon shook his head weakly. "There is no strength left in me. My bones are dry. My tongue fails me. I cannot rise to lead again." Ahijah looked down at him with compassion. "Then leave a final word, O king. One final word of wisdom. One word of repentance. It will echo longer than your temple or your throne." Solomon closed his eyes, and after a long silence, he nodded. "Then let it be written," he said, "that I, Solomon son of David, once walked with the Lord in truth, but turned away. Let it be written that wisdom without obedience is dust. Let it be known that no kingdom stands forever, unless the Lord upholds it. Nathan, who had re-entered quietly, wrote the words down with trembling hands. Solomon opened his eyes one more time. "And let it be told to my son," he whispered, "that the heart is more dangerous than the sword. If he rules only by pride, he will lose what I built. But if he seeks the Lord, he may still be a king." Ahijah and Zadok bowed their heads. Outside the palace, clouds were gathering. The skies darkened slowly. A wind blew in from the wilderness, dry, harsh, and strange. The people of Jerusalem began to look upward, sensing something unusual in the air. The prophet's warning had been spoken. The king had given his confession. But the storm was only beginning. The air grew thick with tension as the sky darkened above Jerusalem. Though no rain had fallen, the winds carried dust through the palace corridors, stirring drapes and extinguishing oil lamps. Servants whispered that the heavens mourned, though no one dared say why aloud. Within his private chamber, Solomon lay weaker than before, his body failing with each passing hour. His breath came shallow, his hands trembled. But his mind, once clouded, now burned with sharp purpose. He had something left to do. "Bring me Rehoboam," he said. The command was sent swiftly, and Rehoboam, though bitter and impatient from the earlier conversation with Nathan, obeyed. He entered the chamber and knelt before his father. Solomon opened his eyes and studied his son. The boy had the look of a king, strong shoulders, dark hair, and a voice that carried. But his heart, Solomon had long suspected it was foolish, prideful, and restless, just like his own in his youth. "My son," Solomon rasped, "come closer." Rehoboam rose and knelt at his father's side. "I am here." Solomon reached for his hand. "Do you know what it is to bear a crown?" Rehoboam frowned. "To rule over the people with strength and justice." Solomon shook his head slowly. "No, to bear the crown is to bear the heart of the nation, their sins, their fears, their dreams. It is a weight that crushes proud men and tests the wise." Rehoboam looked away, uncomfortable. Solomon continued, "I built cities, ships, fortresses. I made gold as common as stones. But I also built shrines to gods who are not gods. I allowed foreign altars in Israel. I sinned, and it has cost us more than you know." Rehoboam swallowed. "The people fear me already. They say I am not like you." Solomon's voice grew stern. "Then make them see the Lord in you, not yourself. He alone preserves the kingdom, not wealth, not armies, not bloodline." There was a pause. Then Solomon reached beneath his robe and pulled out a small wooden box. It was ancient, more a keepsake than a treasure. Rehoboam helped him lift the lid. Inside was a scroll, a single one. The parchment was worn, the ink slightly faded. "This," Solomon said, "was given to me by my father, David. It contains his last words to me, before I became king." Rehoboam picked up the scroll and read the words. "Be strong and show yourself a man. Keep the charge of the Lord your God, to walk in his ways, to keep his statutes, his commandments, that you may prosper in all you do and wherever you turn." Rehoboam looked up, stunned. "He gave this to you?" Solomon nodded. "And now I give it to you. But remember, those words mean nothing unless they reach your heart. You must not be a king of stone palaces and empty decrees. You must be a servant first and a son of the covenant." Tears welled in Rehoboam's eyes, though he did not understand everything. He took the scroll with both hands, unsure of what would come next. Solomon placed his hand on his son's head. "May the Lord give you the wisdom I lost." Just then, a knock sounded at the chamber door. A messenger entered, his face pale. "My lord," he said, bowing to Solomon, "Jeroboam, son of Nebat, has returned from Egypt. He is in the city." Rehoboam stiffened. Jeroboam had once served Solomon, but a prophet had foretold that 10 tribes would follow him. He was a threat. Solomon smiled faintly. "It begins," he whispered. Rehoboam turned to his father. "Shall I have him arrested?" Solomon closed his eyes. "No, you cannot stop what the Lord has spoken. Rule with fear, and you will lose them. Rule with mercy, and you may keep one tribe." As Rehoboam rose and walked out of the room, scroll in hand, Solomon watched him go, his last son, his chosen heir. And though sorrow pressed heavily on the king's chest, there was also a glimmer of something else. Hope, faint, flickering but real. As the sun dipped behind the hills of Jerusalem, its final rays caught the glint of something. High above the city, something not of the Lord. On the Mount of Olives, where David once wept and prayed, now stood altars of abomination. Ashtoreth, Chemosh, and Molech loomed over the holy city in silent defiance of the temple of the Lord. It had started subtly, one altar for a beloved Egyptian wife, one shrine to keep peace with a Sidonian princess. Solomon, in his wisdom, had thought himself above corruption. But now he saw clearly. He had not led the people away with swords or speeches. He had simply allowed a little compromise, and then another. And compromise had grown into betrayal. Solomon sat upright in his bed with great effort. The room was dim, and his body cried for rest, but his spirit stirred. "Give me Benaiah," he ordered. Moments later, the commander of the king's guard entered swiftly, his armor gleaming. "My lord." Solomon pointed weakly toward the window that looked east. "There are gods upon the hill. I placed them there. I have sinned." Benaiah bowed his head. "Yes, my king. I command you," Solomon said with surprising strength. "Before the sun rises again, tear them down." Benaiah's eyes widened. "My lord, some are guarded. The foreign wives. They are not queens of Israel," Solomon growled. "They are women I brought into my house, and I let them bring their gods. But this is the land of the Lord, the land of Abraham, of Moses, of my father David. No god shall stand above his name. Not anymore." Benaiah saluted. "It shall be done." That night, under cover of darkness, Solomon's elite guards rode silently to the Mount of Olives. With axes, ropes, and fire, they tore down the idols that had stood too long. Statues of Chemosh shattered against the rocks. Altars to Ashtoreth were toppled and burned. The cries of protest from foreign wives and servants echoed faintly through the city, but none dared stop the king's order. Back in the palace, Solomon sat alone. No musicians played. No incense burned. The wind that came through his window was cold, but pure. He prayed. It had been years since he had prayed without ceremony or spectacle. But now, with death near, Solomon spoke from the heart. "O Lord, God of Israel, there is no one like you in heaven above or on earth below. I have built you a house of stone, but I failed to keep my heart as a house for you." Tears fell freely now. "I turned aside. I thought I was too wise to fall, but I was a fool. You warned me, and I did not listen. But I ask, have mercy on your servant, not for my sake, but for David's, and for the people who still call on your name." The room was quiet. No voice answered. No fire fell from heaven. But within Solomon's heart, a peace began to stir. Not the peace of approval, but the peace of being heard. Later that night, Nathan came to check on him. "You had the idols destroyed," the scribe said, surprised. Solomon nodded faintly. "It was my last work as king." Nathan looked out the window, where the fires still burned on the hill. "Do you believe the Lord has forgiven you?" Solomon's eyes glistened. "I do not know, but I have returned to him. That must be enough." He coughed, and Nathan offered him water, but Solomon waved it off. "I do not fear death," he said. "I fear only dying without the Lord." He paused and whispered, "But I believe he is near again." Outside the city, the flames on the hill flickered like torches in the wind, chasing away the darkness of idolatry. In the palace, the king, once mighty, once wayward, lay still, waiting for dawn. As midnight passed and the stars scattered across the sky, Solomon slipped in and out of sleep. His breath came slower now. The servants outside his chamber waited in silence. No more commands came. No more visitors were allowed in. Word had spread quietly throughout the palace. The king was nearing the end. But within the quiet chamber, something stirred. Solomon, weakened in flesh, entered a dream unlike any he had known before. It was not like the visions of his youth. No blazing fire. No booming voice from the heavens. It began with stillness, like the calm that comes before the sea opens to reveal the deep. He found himself standing again in the courts of the temple. But it was not the same as the one he had built with stone and gold. This one shone with a light not of the sun. The columns glowed like they were carved from living fire, and the air was full of a sound like singing water. A figure stood at the altar, a man, robed in white, crowned with many crowns. His face shone like the sun, yet Solomon felt no fear. Instead, he fell to his knees and wept. "Who are you, my lord?" he asked. The man approached and touched his shoulder. I am the wisdom you once knew. Solomon trembled. You walked with me in the beginning, the man continued. You prayed for understanding, and I gave it to you. You judged righteously. You built my house. But then, your heart grew proud. You turned from me to worship what your hands had made. Solomon bowed lower. I know. I am ashamed. I do not deserve mercy. There was a pause. Yet I have not cast you away, the man said. Your heart has returned. Though your kingdom will be shaken, your seed will endure. Solomon looked up, confused. My seed. The man stretched out his hand. And Solomon saw a vision unfold before him, generation upon generation. Kings rose and fell. The temple was destroyed and rebuilt. The people were scattered, then returned. And then, in the fullness of time, Solomon saw something that made his breath catch. A child, born of a virgin in Bethlehem. A carpenter's son, teaching in the courts with wisdom greater than his own. A man, nailed to wood, crowned with thorns. A king, risen from the dead, seated on a throne not made by human hands. Solomon wept again. Who is he? The man replied, He is the son of David, the true king, from your line, but greater than you. His throne will never end. Solomon placed his forehead to the shining floor. My wisdom was but a shadow of his. Yes, the man said, but you have returned to me, Solomon, and that is wisdom. The dream began to fade. The light softened. The temple dissolved like morning mist. Solomon felt himself falling, not into darkness, but into rest. When he opened his eyes again, he was back in his bed. The room was dim. Only one lamp flickered. Nathan sat nearby, half asleep. Solomon reached for him. Nathan, the scribe stirred and came to his side. I saw him, Solomon whispered. The true king, the one to come. Nathan leaned closer. Write this down, Solomon said with fading breath. All is vanity under the sun, except the fear of the Lord. That is the beginning of all wisdom. Nathan nodded, tears in his eyes. Solomon smiled faintly. The pain was gone. The weight lifted. And as the final hour of the night came, King Solomon, son of David, builder of the temple, lover of wisdom, closed his eyes for the last time. But in that stillness, something more than death had come. Redemption. As dawn broke over Jerusalem, the first light of morning touched the stone of the temple and the rooftops of the royal palace. The wind had stilled. The sky, after a night of strange clouds, was now calm and blue. A great quiet fell over the city, a stillness unlike any it had known before. Inside the royal chambers, Solomon lay motionless. His hands were folded over his chest, his face peaceful, almost youthful again, as if the years had rolled back in his final hour. Nathan, the faithful scribe, stood silently beside him, eyes wet with tears. The lamp beside the bed flickered out. A servant entered slowly and bowed deeply. Is it finished? Nathan nodded. The king has gone to rest. With that, the palace changed. Servants began to move through the halls with heavy steps. Couriers were dispatched. The priests in the temple were told. The guards at the gates were informed. Trumpets did not blow. There was no loud announcement. But a soft mourning began to rise among the people. Word spread, like fire through dry grass. King Solomon is dead. The priests dressed in sackcloth. The Levites sang no songs that morning. At the altar, sacrifices were offered not for celebration, but for remembrance. In the palace courtyard, officials and elders gathered in silence, their faces solemn. Rehoboam, now the king, stood before the people in his father's court. His hands trembled. He wore the royal robe, but it did not yet feel like his own. His eyes lingered on the empty throne, his father's throne. He looked to the scroll Solomon had given him, the final words of David, passed down like a torch in the darkness. Be strong. Keep the ways of the Lord. Walk in his commandments. The people awaited his first words, but Rehoboam said nothing. He turned and walked into the temple courts alone. There, before the altar his father had built, he knelt. I do not know how to lead these people, he whispered. But you do, Lord. Be my guide, as you were once my father's. Far above him, the priests chanted a psalm of mourning. When the righteous perish, no one takes it to heart. The faithful are taken away, and no one understands. That the righteous are taken to be spared from evil. Later that day, the royal tomb was opened. The house of David, carved into the hillside, waited to receive its greatest king since the shepherd of Bethlehem. Solomon was wrapped in fine linen, anointed with spices, and carried by 12 of his most trusted men. Behind them walked Zadok the priest, Nathan the scribe, and Benaiah the commander. Then Rehoboam, followed by the elders of Israel. No shouts rang out, only the sound of footsteps, prayers, and the weeping of those who had once called him Solomon the Wise. At the tomb, the stone was sealed. A slab was placed at its front, engraved with ancient words. Here lies Solomon, son of David, king of Israel, builder of the house of God, lover of wisdom, humbled by his own heart, remembered by the Lord. That night, fires burned throughout the land in his honor. Tribes lit torches in Judah, Benjamin, and beyond. Women sang laments. Men recited his proverbs. Children were told of the king who spoke with God, judged the people, and wrote wisdom on scrolls that would never fade. But in heaven, something greater stirred. For the soul of Solomon had come home. He who had built a house for the Lord now entered the house not made with hands, eternal in the heavens. And though he had stumbled, though his heart had wandered, he had returned at the end. And the Lord, rich in mercy, received him, not as a failed king, but as a forgiven son. And so ended the life of Solomon, the son of David, not with pride, not with power, but with peace,